What's up, Bills Mafia? Fernando Schmude here. That's your leading the charge in my own Fernando Schmude channel. And today I have the pleasure of having with me Mike Bundt from Trainwreck Sports. Mike, welcome to the show, man. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to talking some Bills football.
Absolutely. We've talked a little bit via X DMs, and I'm excited with this new season coming and this new draft class, and you seem excited as well. You've done an awesome breakdown with all the Bills draft class and all the picks, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm excited to talk Bills draft with you and to share with Bills Mafia our thoughts on these new draftees that are joining the team and this new phase of the Buffalo Bills, right, Mike? Because it's not your kind old in all senses, your old Buffalo Bills. You know, it's a rejuvenated team. It's a new roster. It's a new plan. And what's your overall takes on this draft class, man? Did they draft some guys that you really wanted, or they went to completely different guys? And how are you feeling about this draft class? Share me a little bit of this background and how do you feel about this new group of players joining the team?
Yeah, I think it's a solid, not flashy draft class. And what I mean by that is I think they got a bunch of quality players, but no one that I anticipate becoming a star at the next level, but a lot of guys that I think have the ability to be pretty good in the NFL. Start off with a Keon Coleman. Is he going to be the next great thing at receiver? I don't think so. But do I think he's going to have a chance to have a lengthy NFL career where he's going to be a solid contributor and provide what the Bills want as a bigger receiver? Yeah, absolutely. A Cole Bishop. You're looking at a safety that can go in the box, make tackles, cover tight ends, make booming hits. Could be a day one starter. Excited about that. Dwayne Carter, plug and play defensive tackle. Ray Davis, solid running back that is going to be a backup right away. Is good out of the backfield, but also a solid pass catcher, just like James Cook. Then some of the other guys here, Cedric Van Pran Granger, someone that will have a chance to compete for the starting center spot maybe in a few years. Who knows? Maybe this year he makes a competition, but a solid player who played for 2 national championship teams at Georgia. Edefwan Ulofoshio, a guy that will provide linebacker depth. Javon Solomon, one of the top sack producing defensive ends in college football the last 3 years. And then even the later picks. Tylen Grable, he was a FCS AP All-American at Jacksonville State before transferring to Central Florida. Daquan Hardy, very talented nickel corner who will learn behind Taron Johnson. And Travis Clayton, well, we'll see. He played in England. Have no clue how that's going to turn out, but very athletic guy. Excited to see at least him get an opportunity to play American football.
Yeah, man, and giving Aaron Cromer those athletic studs, right, to work with and to, especially in Clayton's situation, but even Grable hasn't played offensive lineman for long, right? He was a tight end, and before that he was a quarterback, right? So
yeah, I believe he played quarterback in high school, if I'm correct.
Yeah, and then tight end and then offensive line, but those are guys that tested so well athletically, and they are totally open, like blank pages for Cromer, so he can work with them and teach them what he really wants, right? They don't have bad habits. They don't have a lot of other knowledge from the position. They are totally new guys with the best athletic ability possible in the hands of maybe the best offensive line coach in the league, right? So I'm really excited to see what Cromer can do with those guys, and we've seen how expensive those offensive lineman players have been, right? In recent free agency, we've seen some guards signing huge deals. We know that Spencer Brown is playing in a contract year next season, right? So having those young guys being developed by Cromer, learning what this awesome offensive line coach won, it's exciting. I think a lot of people question about, oh, the Bills should have gone in another direction with a more productive and college player, maybe a guy that put up a better resume in college. But there is value going after those extremely athletic guys that can be developed by an awesome coach. If you have an awesome offensive line coach, why not take advantage of that and try to develop some young talent there, right?
Absolutely. In like you said, Cromer is one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. He's had a ton of success throughout his career developing guys, even under the radar guys that didn't have high expectations. We're already talking about Alec Anderson on the Bills offensive line as someone that has taken massive strides since coming to Buffalo from UCLA. When Ryan Bates was in Buffalo, I know that he had some opportunities before Cromer was part of it, but still had starting opportunities when Cromer was here. If there's one coach where you're just like, give him athletic players and let's see what he can do with it, it's Cromer. So they got a few offensive linemen in this draft that have high athleticism, and let's see if he can mold them into something. And that's the real good thing about their situation is when you have a bunch of proven starters on your offensive line, you have the ability to take a couple chances on guys and try to develop them and have developmental talent, which I think some of these later round picks will eventually be in Buffalo.
Yeah, man. Last time I remember a former tight end, becoming a tackle for us, it worked pretty well for that guy, right? So
very much
it's
so.
never. So I really can see the value there, and I saw some people mad at those picks. Why draft a guy from England who plays soccer and plays rugby and plays everything else, but not football? Why to draft a guy like this instead of maybe a corner, because we need more corner depth or things like that, or another wide receiver? Everybody wanted more wide receivers. But I definitely can understand this pick, and I can see the value there, right? And just like you said, Mike, Vandermark is another athletic guy that has been developed by the Bills, right? And even played a little bit last year in Dion's place. So I'm looking forward to this competition during the OTAs, training camps, and preseason, because normally we are used to watching offensive line play in preseason, and when the second offensive line enters the field, we are like, oh, the backup cornerback had no shot because the backup offensive line is so bad that he has no time. And the third one, even worse, right? But last season, it didn't happen for us already. We could see the backup offensive line playing well during preseason. And now I'm looking forward to even more of that, because it seems there will be a lot of competition for some spots there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about an offensive line right now that has guys that don't even have guaranteed starting spots. Names like David Edwards, Lyle Collins. Like there's some good guys. I think Alec Anderson is turning into a solid player, a solid backup on this offensive line. So that's what you want. You need depth behind the starters, because inevitably you're going to have injuries throughout the season, and you need to be able to feel comfortable enough in the next man up mentality that whoever is going to fill in is going to do their job, and you're not going to have much of a drop off. So I do like that. It seems like they're putting a big emphasis on maintaining a deep offensive line, because I think that was one of the things that was overlooked last year. There was a massive improvement by the offensive line, and that's part of the reason why the Bills were able to really start running the ball more effectively and give Josh Allen more time in the pocket. I know Josh does a lot to get away from sacks and pressure, but the offensive line did a good job in front of him, making his life much easier as well.
100%. And we could notice last season the offensive line playing with more of an edge, like being more physical, blocking in a more in a with more nasty, a nastiness to those guys trying to block, and not just to block their opponents, but also putting them on the ground. And we could see that with Torrance being started in the starting lineup in offensive line, and Spencer Brown always has been like this. I feel like Dion stepped up and played in an even better level last season, right? And McGovern was a great addition. Now McGovern moving to center, I feel like they are really invested to this plan of having McGovern there. Just watching McGovern speak about it, and recently he was with Eric Wood in his podcast talking about being the tip of the spear now, and he's excited to be the center for the Bills. So I feel like the Bills are really working correctly with this offensive line, not just the starters, but building some depth. And it wasn't all about adding unproven and developmental guys. Van Granger, just like you said, a guy that has started and playing well for a team that has won championship, has been always there competing. And that's a guy that is a solid plan B in case McGovern's move doesn't go all that well and you need to move him back to guard, maybe. We never know. And Van Granger is a really solid prospect and a really athletic guy, a guy that can move a little bit, and reminds me the way the Bills used to have Mitch Morse as a puller, leading some runs, even for Josh Allen. And in Van Granger's tape, you can see a lot of that. So I'm really excited to see the direction and this competition, the offensive line. And we can't forget, Mike, that the Bills have traded away some talent in the offensive line recently in several seasons. Like it started with Taylor, a guy that I hated that trade back in time, because it was to keep Spencer long, but okay, he wouldn't play a lot and they moved him, but we can remember they moving Wyatt Taylor. We can remember they trading away Cody Ford. They traded away Bates recently. They traded away even the center from formerly on the Bengals. I forgot his name now, but for a 7th round pick to the Patriots. And so they are always trading away some talent. Offensive line normally is a position that the league has some trouble to have nice depth, and the Bills seems in a great position, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a tough thing throughout the league. I mean, half the teams in the league don't even have good starters at spots in their offensive line, much less depth that they can depend on. So I am excited about the Cedric Van Granger as well, because it does seem like a lot of people think he can develop into a starter at the NFL level. And to get a guy like that in the 5th round it's exciting. It's great value. He was a finalist for the Remington Trophy, which goes to college football's top center. So he was obviously widely regarded by his peers at the college football level, at the collegiate level. And we'll just have to see. If he comes out in training camp and looks great, maybe there's a chance he could give Connor McGovern a battle, and you could always put McGovern back at left guard. We'll see how serious the Bills are about McGovern at center based on how they handle things at the beginning of training camp. If we see McGovern starting every game at center in the preseason, well, then obviously they're taking a patient approach with Van Granger. But if you start seeing them swap reps, if you see Granger get some opportunities with the ones, maybe there is a possibility he could actually win the job and move McGovern back to left guard. But way too early, a week after the draft, to really think about that possibility at the current moment.
Awesome. Leo is joining us here with his Go Bills and Bills Mafia. Feel free to send questions, even from Bills Mafia in Brazil. Leo is from Brazil. If you want to send questions in Portuguese, I will translate to Mike and let you know. Feel free to send questions or observations. Mike, before moving to the top 4 picks, I want to still talk. We talked about the offensive linemen, but we still have other guys, and I always start backwards with Daquan Hardy. You mentioned him as a really good nickel corner, right? And he really is. He put up some nice numbers, had some production. He's very athletic as well, and it seems his size is something that made him fall. And that's something that we could see with 2 of the guys here, Hardy and Solomon. It's fair to say that those guys with a couple of inches more to their size, they wouldn't be there that late in this draft, because we are talking about those two productive guys, right? Hardy as a nickel corner and returner, and he should be able to compete for a returning starting position even. And Solomon, that's a really productive pass rusher. I love his tape and I love his production. And despite the lack of size, he has some long arms. And I remember again Eric Wood in his podcast talking about having to block against smaller guys. Sometimes people don't value smaller players on the defensive line, but they are tougher to be blocked sometimes because of their lower center of gravity and the size of the own offensive linemen needed to deal with those smaller guys. Solomon might be a handful for some people trying to block him off the edge, right, Mike? So how do you see those two additions? I gotta really admit that Javon Solomon was one of my favorite picks in this draft, and I'm looking forward to see him. But tell me you a little bit about those guys.
Yeah, both of these are under the radar players that a lot of fans entering the draft probably didn't have circled going to Buffalo, but they're guys that have that upside that make them intriguing day 3 picks. I'll start out with Hardy, a nickel corner. It'd be a great situation for him to come to Buffalo, learn behind Taron Johnson, who was a second team All-Pro last year. It's hard to learn from a better nickel corner than Taron Johnson. So I think Hardy's in a good spot right there. There's some Ryan Talbot had an article the other day for Syracuse.com saying that there were scouts that thought he might be one of the hidden gems of this draft class. I'd have to watch a little bit more of him before I can get to that point, but obviously a lot of high praise for him, despite being a late round pick and a quality returner at Penn State. And then Javon Solomon, the stats speak for themselves. He had 31 and a half sacks the last 3 years, had production before then. You mentioned the size, that's a question. And then the bigger question beyond the size is the competition level he did it against in college. Doing it at Troy is not the equivalent to doing that at Alabama or Georgia against SEC competition. Now, I will say this to those that are unfamiliar with Troy football. They play in the Sun Belt, which and have been a very successful Group of 5 program over the past 10, 15 years. So even though they play a smaller level compared to the big-time schools in Division I, they are still a very good football team, and they have had numerous NFL players over the years. So 31 and a half sacks to me is 31 and a half sacks. That guy did it for 3 years at the college level. I want to see if he can do it at the NFL level. I'm not expecting him to be one of the best pass rushers in the game, but there has to be something there that can hopefully translate in Buffalo. And I do think there's reasons to take chances on guys like that, because what are you losing? You're not taking much of a risk. If he comes out and he struggles, well, you had a day 3 pick on him. But if you found something, if he can hit, and even if it's just a situational pass rusher, you take that at that round and that time that you selected.
Yeah, man, it's not easy to find some premier pass rushers out of the early picks, even out of the first round, and I have no reason to not kick the tires on a guy like Solomon. And Hardy, man, we remember we had Nickel Roby Coleman as an awesome nickel corner, and he was even smaller than Hardy, right? So if the guy is really good, he might have a future playing this position in NFL. We know he's athletic, and we know he can make some plays, and adding as a returner, it's even better, right? He can find a role in the special teams and be active on game days. That's a major factor for a guy, an advantage for a guy, a depth piece, right?
Absolutely.
And closing the group of before the top 4, we have Olufo Shio, the linebacker from Washington, another program that has competed at the highest level this season, right? Went in college playoffs still, and another impressive guy, a former walk-on that needed to fight for his place and earn everything that he got on college level. really athletic, great size, right? Normally, we've seen athletic guys playing linebacker for the Bills, like Milano and now Bernard, but size-wise, they aren't the prototypical size for linebackers. Olufoshiu has that size, has that speed, and obviously a piece to be developed, but still a guy that fits what the Bills look at the linebacker position, right, Mike?
Yeah, so intriguing prospect. You mentioned he was a walk-on. It's hard to go from being a walk-on at the Power 5 program to becoming one of the top linebackers in all of college football. Third-team AP All-American last year at Washington, a team that competed in the national championship game this past year against Michigan. He put up the numbers, he had the production, and he was the star, one of the stars of that defense. Everybody always thinks about the Washington offense, obviously rightfully so, with guys like Michael Penix Jr., Romo Dunze, and the rest of their weapons offensively. But this Edefwan Olufosio was a very, very solid player last year for the Huskies. And the reason why he dropped, well, he dealt with a lot of injuries, and he's an older prospect. He's 24 years old. So teams are not going to invest day one, day two capital as much into older players, with the exception of guys that they know are going to be stars. Like a Dalton Kincaid was an older prospect last year, but it was people were fairly certain he was going to translate at the NFL level. Olufosio is going to, could he? Possibly, but there's some uncertainty still with his age and stuff like that. The good news for him with the Bills linebacker room, he will not be rushed into any situation. He'll be given the time, and hopefully he'll provide some value to the Bills.
Yeah, man, the Bills just added Deion Jones, now formerly on the Panthers, but before on the Falcons, where he was one of the best linebackers even in the league. But I think it's fair, despite he's being 29 now, he's past his prime. His best years are already behind him. But the Bills keep adding to that linebacker room, right? And after what happened last playoffs and what happened needing to have AJ Klein playing the majority of the snaps against the Chiefs, coming from his couch, coming from a vacation trip, right, with his family. It seems like the Bills are preparing all they can to have a group very ready for whatever it takes. Because when you play Milan, when you play Bernard, undersized guys, and as aggressive as they play, it's kind of expected them to be nicked up, sometimes injured, and you have to have some nice depth. And Dorian is developing, and we hope he's better prepared this season, his second year, just like Bernard was better prepared his second season compared to his first one. But it's nice to add some depth, and especially athletic depth, like those guys. For sure, I think he fits that mold, right?
Yeah, and you mentioned the guys on this linebacker room now. It's a pretty deep group of players now. You go Bernard Milano, now you got Nicholas Morrow, Deion Jones, you have Dorian Williams, Balin Spector, Edefwan Olufosio. You have 7 guys right there. So they're not all going to make the team. Now, Deion Jones, is he locked to make the team? Probably not. He's probably battling for a spot. Balin Spector, he's probably battling for a spot. Is Olufosio a lock for this team? You think being a 5th-round pick that he would have a good shot at making it, but I wouldn't put him in lock category at this point in time. There's going to be some guys at linebacker that are going to be battling for one of the final spots on this roster.
Yeah, 100%. Before moving on to the top 4, I have a quick note to the Bills Mafia here in Brazil and Bills Mafia everywhere. Hit that like button, subscribe to my own channel. Soon I will have some memberships available as well. And let me put this quick note to the Bills Mafia em Brasil. Mafia, deixa seu like, se inscreve gratuitamente aqui no canal e me ajuda com a divulgação para que a gente possa alcançar cada vez mais toda a Bills Mafia BR, não só aqui no Brasil, mas por todo o mundo. Me siga nas redes sociais, no Twitter, @Fernando Schmude, muito conteúdo de Bills por lá. na Twitch, F1S Live com conteúdo de Madden. E no Instagram, segue o @blog dos Bills, um trabalho do Célio feito por lá, excelente, com todas as notícias sobre Bills em português, super atualizado, vale a pena. Além disso, você pode se tornar um colaborador do meu canal e dar todo o suporte necessário para que eu possa me dedicar cada vez mais a produzir conteúdo sobre Bills em português. Conto com você. Tenho 2 planos. Colaborador quarterback da franquia, assim como o Josh Allen, você pode ter um impacto de quarterback da franquia no canal. R$17 por mês. Uma live extra por semana interativa. Acesso ao vivo às lives de Breaking News. Acesso ao grupo de WhatsApp do canal, onde você tem um ótimo conteúdo sendo compartilhado pela comunidade por lá, além de novidades com o início dos jogos. R$17 por mês, QR Code está na tela, você pode fazer o Pix também pelo fernandoschmude@hotmail.com. Ou, para quem pode colaborar com um pouco mais aí, o colaborador Hall da Fama, R$78 por mês, número da camisa do lendário Bruce Smith, o GOAT aí dos Bills. Benefícios exclusivos também, todos os benefícios do quarterback da franquia, escolha de pauta para lives e vídeos, um sorteio mensal de membros do canal. O mês passado foi um boné New Era do Buffalo Bills oficial, além de novidades com o início dos jogos. O QR Code está na tela, você pode colaborar também através do Pix fernandoschmude@hotmail.com. Pega seu comprovante, entre em contato comigo por uma das minhas redes sociais ou pelo próprio e-mail. Me manda lá seu comprovante, me manda seu número de telefone, eu te adiciono nos grupos de WhatsApp e você vai ser muito bem-vindo à comunidade do canal do Fernando Schmude. Muito obrigado a todos e Go Bills! So Mike understands Portuguese perfectly. He supports all the message, right, Mike?
Absolutely. I am on board with all of that.
Awesome. So Mike, let's move on to the top 4, right? We are coming from the later round, so let's start with Ray Davis, running back, picked on the 4th round. And man, there were other names that some people wanted on that pick, right? I know I liked Estime a lot, Audric Estime, and I know other people liked Braylon Allen and other names. But one thing can't be denied, like nobody can deny that Davis has been or was in college very productive back, a guy that produced everywhere, and he's already used to moving on from one team to another team. So it's kind of expected that he can move to Buffalo and produce as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be his 4th team since starting college. Played at 3 different schools, Temple, Vanderbilt, Kentucky. Now he starts his NFL career in Buffalo. I like the pick. Honestly, I know there was other running backs that a lot of people liked. Ray Davis was one of the running backs I was keeping in my head going into day 3. So when I heard that the Bills selected him, I was happy about this pick, because when I look at a running back room, I want guys that complement one another. And James Cook, obviously, he's the electric guy that can take any carry to the house, and obviously has the receiving ability as well, even though he had some drops last year. Ray Davis, he's a smaller height guy, but big frame body, 5'8", 215 pounds. If you're 215 and a 5'8" body, that means you can be a bowling ball at times. And it's funny because a lot of fans have watched Ray Davis's highlights, and they're like, this guy isn't physical. This guy just cuts and he takes them all to the house. But no, he is a physical runner. He does have some elusiveness to where he can make a cut here. He can break a tackle there. But this is a player that is coming off a year where he set a Kentucky single season touchdown record for a running back, 21 touchdowns, 14 on the ground, 7 in the air. And that's what excites me, because you're going to get a guy that can be your short yardage back. He can be a goal line back, so you don't need to put James Cook in vulnerable situations where he takes hits that are unnecessary. But Davis having that pass catching ability makes him a dual threat. There's not a lot of running backs at the college level that are great at receiving the ball, and he had over 30 receptions last year, over 300 yards, and the 7 touchdowns. And when you watch the film, some of it is on dump downs, like a screen or just a check down, where he's basically making things happen. But then there's other plays where he's running downfield, catching it, nice hands, soft hands, bringing the ball in. So might not be the biggest, flashiest running back that people have ever seen, but I think he's going to fit perfectly as a backup running back, at least right away, splitting time between him and Ty Johnson, and probably eventually being the main guy at the backup running back position.
Yeah, man, I'm glad you mentioned Ty Johnson, because I feel like sometimes Bills Mafia is too eager to see the rookies contributing and the new guys, and obviously everybody nowadays likes to do their own mock drafts and starts to learn about the prospects. And it seems this draft class is always the actual draft class is the most talented, in the world. We forget that last season we had the same feeling with the last draft class, and obviously it's not every player that really can become a successful pro. But Ty Johnson has played really well for the Bills, and I feel like it's going to be difficult for Ray Davis to come in and already take away all snaps from Ty Johnson. But on the other hand, we can see that all the snaps that Latavius Murray was having, and those were some valuable snaps, because we're talking some 2-minute drill snaps, pass blocking snaps, like protecting the quarterback on third down. And that's a nice path for Davis to find some playing time early, and then it's up to him to take advantage of those opportunities, right? Even with the goal line work that you mentioned, because it's not just taking away hits from Cook, but with the way the Bills has played, it's taking away some hits from Josh, right? Because
Absolutely.
Josh has been the main guy as a goal line back, right? So if Davis can show this knack for the end zone early on in his career, he's gonna have some snaps, and he's gonna have a role early on, and that's more than most people can really ask for early in their careers, right?
Absolutely. And that's something I guarantee you Bills management and the Bills coaching staff are praying that he can be a goal line back, so Josh doesn't have to take it in himself every single time they get into a 3rd and goal from the 1, or a 4th and 1 where they feel like they have to do a QB sneak. Like, it's great that you can do it, but ideally you would like to be able to have a handoff to the running back and feel pretty confident that you have the same probability of getting it. Now, it probably will never match a QB sneak, but when you start having grown men tight in space, in tight spaces, it's tough to get that yard all the time. So hopefully Davis can be that way and get the job done. 4th round pick shows that Bean really does want to prioritize him and give him a shot. But like you said, Ty Johnson deserves to be in this competition. Ty Johnson has played well with the Bills last year, and I hope he gets a chance going forward to still make the team and have a chance to compete for the spot. The other back that is going to be interesting to watch is Frank Gore Jr., who obviously his dad was just on the Bills, like 5 years ago? I think it was 5 years ago, 4 years ago.
Not even 5. I think 4 or 3 years ago.
3 years ago. Yeah. I had seen. Yeah. God, that's crazy when you think about it. So it'll be fun to see if Frank Gore Jr. has a chance to make the Bills practice squad, or what his future holds, because he was a productive player at Southern Mississippi, and just like what his father said, overlooked. But this running back room is going to be something interesting to look at going forward.
Yeah, 100%. It seems every year the Bills find a nice back that nobody is expecting to see playing well, and it was like this, man, for quite some time now. Like I remember even with Joyke Bell back in the day, and now recently.
I mean, there's been a ton. Raheem Blackshear a few years ago.
Blackshear, yeah.
There was Gillislee, who ended up going to the Patriots. Carlos Williams. He undid himself. But yeah, there's always, and then there's been other running backs that have been amazing in the preseason. Hell, even Fred Jackson, like out of nowhere. So it's always just like the Bills to find a random running back that turns out to be a good player.
And Davis is gonna wear number 22, so maybe it's a good start for him, right?
Hey, we'll see.
All right. Yeah, man. And then moving on, we have the third round pick with Dwayne Carter, defensive tackle out of Duke, Mr. Duke, right? Team captain for 3 years, the only guy being able to do so as a Duke player. And man, the guy screams the process, right? Because
Absolutely.
that's a guy that has all the right traits, the right character, and obviously it's not just that. We can see the flashes, we can see the tape with some promising traits and some aggressiveness that paired with this nice head over his shoulders, and he's willing to work and to learn and to be the best pro possible. I can't help myself but think another guy in the lines of Kyle Williams and then Harrison Phillips, those nice guys, And Harrison Phillips had to deal with this Kyle Williams comparison, and it isn't easy because Kyle is one of a kind. But now Carter, another guy that has all the right traits to become a very solid contributor in the third round, right?
Yeah, you're talking about a guy that screams character, process, all the stuff that McDermott, Bean love in a prospect. So I actually think that's probably the reason why they ended up taking him in the third round, because there was a lot of people that thought maybe a fourth rounder, but Bills take the chance in the third. They saw a guy that they liked what he had talent-wise, and that character was probably a determining factor in why they took him at 95. 3-year start captain at Duke, first 3-time captain in the history of that program, like you stated when introducing him. The way I look at him is he's a guy that can be a pass rusher at the next level. We'll see how it works out, but it seems like he'll be a better pass rusher than run defender at the pro level. But first team All Atlantic Coast Conference last year, and doing it at a school that's a non-traditional football program. Everybody thinks of Duke, they think of basketball, but they've actually got a pretty good football team in recent years, and Dwayne Carter, a big part of that. So deep tackle depth has probably been one of my biggest concerns about the Bills as a team right now. Behind Oliver and Daquan, I don't really feel completely comfortable with what they have. So Dwayne Carter being a draft pick, getting that in the third round, I now feel a little bit better about the rotation going into the season now.
Yeah, man, and with those guys that have this kind of mindset, it's difficult sometimes. Even going back to Kyle, like I remember people were when they transitioned to a 3-4 defense, and they were like, "Oh, Kyle can't be a nose tackle because he's too small to be a nose tackle." And here we were with Kyle as a nose tackle, playing awesome football, pro ball, all pro level, and with those guys that work that hard and have the right mindset, sometimes you can say a guy can't do something, like Carter. He probably seems like a better pass rusher than run defender as defensive tackle, and when we look at him, we don't see him like maybe becoming a partner to Ed Oliver, and more like a rotational piece to give him a breath, and then. But we never know. If this guy might be willing to learn a lot from Daquan Jones, from the other veterans they have there, the coaching staff, and maybe in 1 year, 2 years, we can see a guy very well rounded and ready to contribute everywhere. So I feel that's why they are willing to maybe overdraft a guy like this a little bit, 1 round ahead of what most people expected, because they really trust his ability to learn and to do his best at whatever role they put the guy on, right?
Yeah, whenever you have a guy that fits what you want, characterized, process-wise, it does make it easier to maybe take a slight, a little bit of a jump on a player compared to where maybe other teams would value, because you think they'll fit what you're doing and that you can teach them or develop them, or that they'll be on the same page with you. So it feels like less of a risk because you believe you have something you can mold. in building the right direction. Kyle Williams, obviously a great example. I believe he was 5th round back in the day and turned out to be one of the best Bills D tackles in team history. So I'm not expecting Dwayne Carter to become Kyle Williams, but if he can learn
the guy, right?
Develop, excited to see what he can become because he definitely does have a high ceiling.
Yeah, man. And then in the second round, Cole Bishop, safety, and I really believe the Bills got out of this draft with 2 starters, and I see Bishop starting. I know I just told you that fans and us as Bills fans, we kind of sometimes want the new guy to succeed and forget the other guys are vets. They've been learning the scheme for longer. They know how to be professionals for longer. They are used to the routines for longer, what the coaches expect from them. But with Bishop, with the way the Bills really wanted him, and with his traits, some of his traits that I read about his scouting report, they remind me so much why I was so high on Terrell Bernard when so many people couldn't believe he could be the middle linebacker, and I was very high because of those traits that I see on Bishop now. A leader, a guy that is a film junkie, a guy that learns fast, a guy that is the kind of every coach's dream with the way he prepares and asks questions and learns the game and studies the game, So with these traits, I'm pretty confident that pairing them with the athletic traits, and when we see Bishop, we have a more athletic guy than Taylor Rapp, than Mike Edwards, than what Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer have been recently aging, right? So pairing those athletic traits and his mindset, his mental traits, I feel like he's coming to start and to be a nice piece to that though defensive backfield. I don't know. How do you see him, Mike? I'm curious to hear from you.
He's probably the most exciting player the Bills drafted in this class, in my opinion, even more so than Keon Coleman. I know wide receiver is going to be the top topic of discussion. He was their top pick. He's been funny. He's become a story throughout the NFL media landscape. But Cole Bishop, I think, has a chance to be the best player in this draft class. You think about Sean McDermott and his success with secondary players throughout his time as a defensive coordinator and now head coach in Buffalo. It feels like Sean McDermott could get any UDFA in the world, put them as a safety or a corner, and that they would suddenly, within like 3 weeks, be one of the top players in their position in the NFL. Like we joke about guys like Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson, but we forget like Levi Wallace was a UDFA who ended up starting several years in Buffalo and then getting picked up by another team as a starter. Dane Jackson, a 6th-round pick, turns into a starter in Buffalo. Christian Benford right now, 6th-round pick, starter in Buffalo. And I know those are corners, but like we also saw it with some other corners that were free agents.
They employer themselves, right?
Yeah,
nobody expected them to be all pro players, right?
So we have a history of McDermott turning these guys. Even EJ Gaines back in the day, Kevin Johnson coming to Buffalo. So the corner room, we know. Taron Johnson, day 3 pick, turns into one of the best nickel corners in the league. Safety, Jordan Poyer. Like, let's be real. Jordan Poyer was not a known commodity before coming to Buffalo. He was an injury-prone player that had proven very little. And the Bills liked whatever traits he brought to the table. Maybe they thought he was instinctual, and they gave him a starter chance, a starting opportunity on a team that didn't really expect to compete for the playoffs. And the rest is history. Even Micah Hyde, he was a nickel corner before coming to Buffalo, and he gets moved to safety. So whatever it is, whether it's scheme, whether it's McDermott having an eye for what type of players fit his system or fit what he's looking for, McDermott knows how to plug and place players in his secondary. So when he goes to draft someone in the 2nd round, to me, that's telling that he really likes what this prospect brings to the table. I know they missed on Elam. I still don't want to say that's going to be a miss forever because Elam will get more opportunities to turn things around. Hopefully that doesn't end up being a bust. But with Cole Bishop, I see a lot of what the Jordan Poyer role was on this Bills defense. A guy that can go in the box, that can make hits at the line of scrimmage, can cover tight ends, instinctual. Once in a while, he's going to make some mistakes because he's just trying to make a play. But I think in McDermott's defense, you encourage that. You want your safety to be a guy that's going to wreak havoc. That was one of the things that Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer were so good at, was they were able to disguise things. They were able to move around, and they were just forces on the field. I'm with you. I think Cole Bishop will start day one, probably over Taylor Rapp, in my opinion. But even if he doesn't, even if he's a backup to start the year, he's going to see the field. Like, this is a guy that is going to be making an impact on the Buffalo Bills this year, whether that be starting as a backup or being one of the starting safeties.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say, like, if he doesn't start right away, he might be in the Matt Milano's rookie season role? Like, remember Matt Milano was
take over midway through. Yeah, 100%.
On Humber, right, playing some snaps, and Milano having some increased role as the season progressed. So if Bishop isn't able to start right away, it's pretty fair to expect him to be like rotating with the guys and getting his fair share of snaps, and
they're going to give him every chance in the world to win it. I think if he's level with those guys in preseason, you give him the job. Only way I don't give him the job is if he's getting outperformed by quite a bit and just looks lost out there. Because if he's level, you got to figure, like, if a rookie comes out and is at the same performance as veterans that have been in the league for a while, it's going to translate. So you might as well get the young guy out there and have him go through his ups and downs early in the year. So by the time you get to the middle of the season, late in the year, he has everything rolling for him at that point. So I'm 100% with you on that.
Awesome. And then our first pick, not a first round pick, but almost one, right? Keon Coleman, wide receiver. Everybody wanted wide receiver. Everybody wanted a number one wide receiver. And with Keon Coleman, man, it's all about expectations, in my opinion. What do you think about this pick? The first pick of the second round, the Bills traded out of the first round twice, traded back once, and then out of the first round the second time. And how did you see not just the Coleman pick, but this plan, trading back and then again, and then picking Coleman, and obviously the choice of the player as well?
It's interesting. I'll say that. I'm intrigued by Keon Coleman. Now, going into the draft, I didn't want to trade back. My first option, I really wanted Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors.
Yeah.
I knew it was never going to happen. But I really did want one of them because I was thinking, like, you get one of those guys on a rookie contract for 4 years. You're paying them next to nothing, and they're going to be stars. So I was on team go for it. And then if they were gone, stay at 28, take who's available. I was hoping Brian Thomas Jr. was then going to drop. He went to Jacksonville. At that point, I kind of accepted trade down was probably inevitable. I thought maybe there was a chance they'd be interested in Xavier Worthy. One thing that's clearly evident through this all is that the Bills did not think of the wide receiver position the way Bills Mafia thought of the wide receiver position. Like, the entire Bills fan base throughout the process was talking about, like, guys like, we want Ladd McConkey, want Xavier Legette. And then late in the process, it was give me Xavier Worthy. People were then saying, let's trade down. We'll get Troy Franklin, who ends up not even going in, like, the first 3 rounds. And Keon Coleman was just a name that no one was talking about the last 100 days. During the college football season, I think people would have liked it. He was a name at that point, but I think people got spooked by his 40 time. I think they got spooked by all the talk about him not being a separator, and thinking back to Josh Allen as a rookie when he didn't have any quality receivers. And I think they forget Josh is now at a different point in his career where he's a veteran. If you're a person that says Josh Allen's one of the greatest quarterbacks in football, well, he should be able to elevate any player around him at this point. Keon Coleman has an incredible skill set, 6'3", 215, one of the best contested catch receivers in football. But he's also really athletic on the field. Like, you get him the ball in a slant or a screen, he can do things. He's a returner with the ball in his hands. He has elusiveness. He has moves. And I really want to see what their plan for Keon Coleman is. I know a lot of the talk right now is he's going to be primarily the X. There's a lot of smarter football people than me that say he needs to start out as a big slot. I don't know how you can do that when you already have Dalton Kincaid in the big slot and you already have Samuel and Shakir playing in the slot. Like, you can't have 4 slot guys. So to me, I think they are being honest that they're going to start him out as the X on the boundary. But that doesn't mean if he has struggles that they can't move him around to like help ease him into things. And the second thing I'd like to say too, I think too many Bills fans went into this process thinking whoever we draft needs to replace Stephon Diggs' production. We need somebody that's going to be a star. So they kept talking about these guys with safe levels of production. I think Keon Coleman has a ceiling that is actually pretty impressive, but there's some risk to it, a lot of unknown. But coming in, he's probably the 4th receiving target on the team behind Kincaid, Shakir, Samuel. So I'm really not expecting him to go off in year 1, but I don't think he needs to for this offense to be successful.
Yeah, man, I recently even tweeted a projection of targets for those guys, and I had Kincaid's targets going over 100 from 91 from last season, but then none of the other guys having more than 100 targets, and I had Coleman, just like you said, behind Kincaid, Shakir, and Samuel, and just like I had him with 80 targets and Cook with 70. Like, it's close, and I really feel like that's why I told him when I introducing him, it's all about expectation. Because if Bills Mafia is waiting for a guy to replace Stephon Diggs and to Coleman to come in and be the guy, the ex wide receiver, but the guy like what we would expect from Neighbors or from Odunze, right? No, it's not Coleman, and it wouldn't be Worthy, it wouldn't be McConkey, it wouldn't be Adonai Mitchell, who I loved, It wouldn't be those guys because they're rookies. They are really young. Mitchell is very young. Coleman is even younger. But if you expect a guy to come in and play the Gabe Davis role and maybe even be an upgrade from what Gabe is, unfortunately, he hasn't played that well recently. So I remember last season when Gabe wasn't producing a lot, and there was a game where the Bills, I think it was still under Dorsey, and the Bills decided to feed Gabe, and he had like 9 catches, more than 100 yards, and he got some screens. He got some passes that we weren't used to see Gabe getting, right, in the Bills offense. I feel like if the Bills decide to do that to Coleman has more tools to work with. Mm-hmm. Just like you said, he's more dangerous after catch. He has he's more explosive. He's more elusive. So he has better hands. So I feel like Coleman can, from day one, be a guy that you can line up at the X spot and ask him to do what Gabe used to do, run some deep routes and then comeback routes where he can show his numbers to Josh and use his good hands, win some contested catches. I feel like you were totally right about Josh. People were like, oh, Josh didn't do so well with big targets. He did better with separators. But it was another time in Josh's career. We've seen recently he throwing some back shoulder passes to Diggs before he even looked to the pass and throwing with a lot of anticipation and good ball placement. If he throws those to Coleman, that's a guy that will go up and get it, It's not a guy that will be looking and sometimes have balls bounce from his hands into interceptions like we unfortunately saw from Gabe recently. So I'm really excited to see him in this offense, and that's why I even had in the title of this episode today, what's the plan for the Bills? Because I feel like some fans are too attached to the mold with Diggs as the main guy, and we always need to have that number one alpha guy, totally dominant, over 100 catch a season, number one wide receiver. And when I think about McDermott and Bean, and when I look at their careers, let's put it like this, the time they were the most successful, they went 15-1 with the Panthers, and they went to a Super Bowl, right? And Ken Newton was the MVP, and their offense had a strong run game, right? They had a tight end leading the way in the pass catching group with Greg Olsen, right? And they had a group of wide receivers that complemented each other. Kelvin Benjamin, who was even injured during that season, but then they had the second round pick in another tall wide receiver, and they had Ted Ginn Jr., the speed guy. They had Jericho Cochery, a savvy veteran that could run some good routes. They had some complementary pieces with the wide receivers. And I definitely can see the Bills trying to emulate that with a strong run game. We've seen with Brady the Bills trying to run the ball more and running better, right? Last season. We have the MVP kind quarterback leading the show. And we have Coleman to replicate the Kelvin Benjamin role. We have Kincaid to replicate the Greg Olsen role. We have Samuel to offer the Ted Ginn speed. We have Shakir to offer what Cochery offered back in the day. So I feel that offense can be very functional with everybody playing their roles and playing it well, and even harder to stop. So I don't get all the Bills Mafia afraid of the lack of a number one guy, because we've seen even recently with Diggs still on the team, the Bills hasn't featured him anymore, right? So I'm curious to see this group, and I can see Bean trying to trade for a more established guy. Maybe if he sees in during the OTAs, the training camps, the preseason, oh, Coleman isn't ready. Oh, Shakir isn't developing and taking the next step. Oh, Kincaid isn't taking the next step. I need to bring somebody. So the trade deadline is in week 8. But before that, I can see him trying to ride with this group of young kids that have all the potential in the world and that certainly can play their roles really well. Not replacing Stephon Diggs, but playing their own roles really well, Mike.
I think those are a lot of great points, and I think you're spot on. A lot of Bills fans, they're spooked by not having a Diggs, and they think now that that's what you need in order for this offense to be effective. Because, to be honest, before Diggs was on this team, the Bills did not produce offensively the way that they did the last 4 years. So I think there's a lot of fear out of Bills fans. Well, if we don't have a Diggs, how are we going to score 27, 28 points a game? Well, that's a good question. Well, you need other players to step up, and you need to do it in other ways. There's only a limited amount of players like Stephon Diggs available in the NFL. There's not more teams don't have a Stephon Diggs than have a Stephon Diggs. And I think fans have to realize that. We've kind of been in this delusional fantasy land the last couple of years where when Gabe Davis wasn't a 1,000-yard receiver, people thought the Bills needed a number 2 receiver that was the equivalent of Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, guys like that. When the reality is most of those guys were honestly number 1 receivers that were just on a team that already had a number 1 receiver. So now we lost our number 1 and number 2. And I do think it's a lot more back to system-based, role-based. One thing I've been saying a lot recently, and I've heard other people now on other networks saying it as well, you got to look at the Bills receiving room like a basketball team. On a basketball court, you have different players in your lineup with different roles. Your point guard, your ball distributor. Your center's your rebounder, the guy that finishes down low. Power forward, built up, aggressive. And then you got some wing players that can attack the hoop that can shoot from the perimeter or also go inside. The Bills are trying to build that with their receiving core. Let's just say that Dalton Kincaid is he's the center of the power forward. He's the guy that you feed. You know when he gets the ball in the paint, he's gonna finish most of the time. When you throw it to Kincaid, more likely than not, you're throwing a completion. He caught over 80% of the passes his way last year. Coleman, you're talking about like a power forward. He's gonna box you out. He's gonna be able to out physical you for the ball. When you're fighting for the ball, good luck to these smaller corners getting their hands around him. Good luck to these smaller corners jumping in the air and stopping him from bringing it down. It's going to be difficult. But then you still have a Shakir that is like your point guard. He finds the spots that no one else sees. So he'll get open underneath. He'll be elusive. He's quick. He's agile. And then it's Curtis Samuel. I won't say point guard. I'll say a shooting guard or wing player, a guy that you can put anywhere. Yeah, you can put him in the backfield. You can line him up outside. You can put him in the slot. But his speed is going to be scary to anybody to face at any given time. So if you ask me, outside of Kincaid, because I think we all acknowledge Kincaid's going to be a star, which one of these guys like just scares you by themselves? I'd say, I don't know, probably not any of them. But when they work in tandem, it creates something else. And what I think you had a really good point about the Carolina Panthers, that they had their most success with a year where they really didn't have the star. Their quarterback
and they lost Kelvin Benjamin that year. Funches was the second round guy.
It's clear that Bean has an affinity for a bigger receiver, and that he feels like it's something that's been lacking in recent years, and that's why he's trying to go back and replicate it. I'll go back to your Carolina point and then throw another thing on top of it. When the Bills' offense was gelling with Brian Dable and then early on in Dorsey, it was still kind of prior to the too high safety looks when people were just constantly going over the top. Kansas City, you couldn't stop them. They were throwing a bomb every single time they went downfield. The Bills could throw bombs. They had John Brown. They had Emmanuel Sanders. Gabe Davis wasn't even being covered half the time. You had Diggs. Like it was too easy. It was an NFL record period for scoring for about a 2-3 year period. What do people always say in the NFL? Eventually, things regress to the mean. Like they revert to the mean. Defenses adjusted. So now what I think the answer, because everybody fell in love with this passing, is now when you have the too high, run the ball effectively because they're daring you to run the ball. So get your yardage when you can run, and then find physical, bigger guys down low like a Coleman, like a Kincaid. Now they can't do the hip drop tackle anyway, so it's going to be harder to take these guys down. Throw it short. Let them do their thing. And eventually, if you get successful enough doing that, defenses aren't going to be able to play too high against you all the time. And then you strike over the top, and that's how you open things up. It's a game of adjustments. I don't think fans are realizing that. And they're so obsessed about we need this do-everything receiver that they forget, like, Diggs was getting older. Davis, everybody was complaining about. Like, they're changing the philosophy. They're trying to build Josh Allen's next window. Because in the NFL, you try to anticipate the evolution of the sport before it happens so that you are cutting edge. The Bills don't want to be repeating what Kansas City is doing because then Kansas City is going to have all the answers for what the Bills are doing. So I'm excited about what they're going to look like going forward. Maybe they make a trade post June 1st. I don't think it's going to be for anybody major like an Ayuk or Higgins just because of salary cap reasons. You just freed up all this cap for the future. Why do you want to take that all back with a big term contract? What I will be interested in, the last thing I'll say about it, does a guy like KJ Hamler turn out to be a vertical threat for the Bills? Sub 4.40, former second round pick. Want to know the crazy thing? I know he's been hurt the last 3 years. He's only 1 year older than Xavier Legette.
Yeah.
He's been in the league for 4 years.
Yeah.
Maybe the Bills have more confidence in Tyrell Shavers. Maybe Quintez Cephas, they have some belief in. Maybe
Shorter.
a Justin Shorter. We don't know what they think about their own room, because at this time last year, how many of us had any faith in Terrell Bernard? None of us, outside of the Bills, because they knew what they brought to the table. So I do have some confidence that the Bills have a better understanding of what they're doing with the receiver room than what the most of us feel like they're doing right now.
Yeah, man, great points, and I totally agree. I'm actually excited to see those guys. I feel like stars are born sometimes out of opportunities, and just like you said, if this offense is hitting on all cylinders and everybody playing really well their own roles, new stars will be born, like when you look at the San Francisco 49ers offense, and Ayuk is great, and Debo is great, and Kittle is great, and but when they lose one of those pieces, their offense isn't that good anymore. We saw Purdy struggle last season when one of the guys came out, or when they lost McCaffrey in anyway. So I feel the Bills are moving this direction, and like 2 years ago, when we were maybe at the highest point of our offense playing awesome, still teams would line up daring us to run the ball when we couldn't run the ball without trusting Josh maybe to run the ball. We couldn't be sure that with a light box we would be able to punish people running the ball. And it changed this last season. I feel like the Bills now, people need to account for this running game. And again, the Bills will try to make it even better. The offensive line being reinforced, the running back room being reinforced, the wide receiver group with more blockers, guys that can block in Hollins and Coleman. Those guys can block a lot. And so I feel like they have people to play their roles that they want. And if the team is winning with those guys, we don't see one guy that could be everywhere and be a star. But in the Bills system, with what they want from their players, they might become stars. So I'm curious to see it, and I can see this plan, and I feel a like of the Bills season is all about those young players getting better, taking the next step. We expect Kincaid to do so. We expect Shakir to do so, take another step, right? And if we go 1 year ago, I wanted DeAndre Hopkins badly, because I was like, man, after Diggs we don't have anything. We have a rookie tight end. We have Shakir, we don't know. Hardy, Sheffield, we're going to trust those guys. Gabe, I couldn't really trust Gabe. And so I was like, man, we need another guy. It's only Diggs, And now, we don't have Diggs, but I feel we have Kincaid more established and closer to becoming a superstar. We have Shakir in another phase of his career. It's not like a year ago when we had no idea about Shakir, and people were even talking about he might be cut because we have Sheffield, Hardy, all those guys, So I'm really confident, and even Samuel, he's so underrated by Bills Mafia. That's the last time we saw Samuel with Brady, he was a 1,000 wide receiver, and he didn't really have a great quarterback throwing him the ball, right? And the same thing happened with the Commanders. So I feel like Samuel can resurrect his career and be really productive for the Bills, just like when John Brown arrived and became a number one for Josh Allen, and Josh Allen was able to even make Cole Beasley achieve things that he hadn't achieved as a Cowboy. So I feel Josh Allen is the right guy to elevate those guys. So I'm very confident this group can be good enough, and people will start to look at those players in a different way after they can see them playing on their own roles, with Brady calling the shots, and especially Josh feeding them. And another situation, Mike, Josh won't need to deal with Diggs wanting the ball all the time, and who knows what Diggs was telling on those sidelines all the time. Like, now he can simply go through his reads, run the offense, play the way he believes is the right way to play, not really worried about, man, it's going well, but Diggs is not happy. We gotta feed him, We could see with Dorsey feeding him early on a lot last season. and the Bills weren't winning games. So I'm confident the Bills they have a plan, and I'm willing to trust this plan, and to see what's gonna happen when the season starts.
I'm with you. When you've won the second most games in the NFL over a 4-year period, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt with what you're doing. A lot of people want to always be like, "Oh, it's just Josh Allen carrying this team." No, the Bills have had a great defense. They've had good playmakers. They've had a solid all-around team during the last 4 years, and that's not just because of Josh Allen. It's because they have a good coaching staff. They have a great general manager, and they've constructed an all-around roster. The only thing that they're missing is a championship and deep playoff runs. And unfortunately, that's going to happen in leagues like the NFL, where you're going up against maybe one of the greatest teams in the history of football on a yearly basis in the playoffs. It sucks, but if football was something else like European soccer, where the top team at the end of the year is the team with the best record, the Bills would be winning championships. The Bills would be having a chance to win titles. It's
true.
The playoff system. Sometimes there's just that one team that has your number. And unfortunately, Kansas City has just been the Bills' number. So a lot of us in the fan base, we continuously focus on what the Bills haven't done. And we forget to acknowledge, what have the other 30 teams in the NFL done against Kansas City? No one else is having success. San Fran has gone against them twice in the Super Bowl, and they found a way to lose twice in horrific fashion. So it's not just the Bills that lose horrifying games in the playoffs against Kansas City. It's also San Fran. It's also teams like Baltimore. And people have to remember, as long as you have Josh Allen in his prime, which I anticipate lasting at least another 5 to 7 seasons minimum, you're going to be in it every year.
Yeah, man, definitely. Yeah, and when you talked about Poyer, you reminded us that the Bills weren't supposed to end the drought that season, right? And
no,
they did
that team was supposed to be. People thought they were tanking.
Yeah,
like
traded Darius, a lot of cap hits and dead cap money, right?
I picked them to go 7-9 that year, and maybe 8-8. And people thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
and that ended up being the year they ended the drought. So,
yeah. So it's time to make them again. People or national media, even some Bills fans, they aren't expecting this Bills team to continue to be a favorite or they expecting some regression. But I feel like with all those young guys, it's time for McDermott to work again his magic, just like season, and elevate this team a little bit. And elevating this team a little bit is keeping them in contention. So with Josh under center and with the potential those guys have, the young fresh legs that are being inserted on the starting lineup, I feel like it's very possible the Bills continue to contend and who knows, might even surprise a lot of people and that's the year they can surprise Kansas City. Who knows that after all they had our number, but they had our number from an older and other team in the past, right? It's a changed team now.
Yeah, I mean, normally when things happen, it comes when you don't expect it. So I wouldn't be surprised if of all the years, this is the year we go in with lower expectations. Somehow they feel at ease in the playoffs when they get there, and they somehow pull it off because no one will be expecting it, which means maybe the Bills will be loose enough to where they'll be able to execute in those difficult moments that they've fallen short. Because really, if you look at the Bills, 2 of the last 3 losses in the playoffs, it was just they crumpled in the biggest moments. It's not that they couldn't beat KC. They easily could have beat KC. They just didn't execute. And some of that's coaching and some of that is on players not making plays when expected. You can't just say, Sean McDermott, what are you doing on this play call? If you practice something the entire season and the players don't execute when it matters, shame on your players. Like they got a job. They know the job. They got to do it.
Yeah, man, 100%. Mike, thank you so much for joining me today here on my show on the Leading the Charge. I'm sure Bills Mafia enjoyed a lot this talk. I had a blast. Really appreciate you taking your time joining me. And please talk a little bit about your work at Trainwreck Sports and what's being up.
Yeah, first off, thanks for the opportunity to go on the show. I really enjoyed this last hour, 15 minutes. I'm with Trainwreck Sports. If you guys haven't seen my work before, I do a lot of videos on the Bills and then other Buffalo sports as well. You can find Trainwreck Sports on Twitter. But if you want more of my content, I do a lot of podcasts, Bills-related stuff. Look up Bundt Takes on Twitter. My last name, the Bundt, and then just Takes. It's kind of a play on words with Bundt cake. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but the cake with the hole in the middle. Just look up Bundt Takes and you'll find all my stuff. So I appreciate the time and appreciate anyone that subscribes to my channel.
Awesome, Mike. Thank you, Bills Mafia. Subscribe to my own Fernando Schmude channel and hit that like button. I need your support. I really appreciate your taking your time joining us today. And I'll be back next Sunday with the Leading the Charge in Portuguese to Brazilian Bills Mafia. And the Leading the Charge in English will be back next Friday as well, always at noon East. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Bills Mafia. And that's it for today. Go Bills.